You tend to only race on the turf when it's firm, just good, but you don't race on it when it's soft, so those horses don't get a chance. So I think that's one factor. Here we tend to train more in straight lines rather than turning, using hills. Like at Manton where you went, I trained there for 6 years. I could have all those 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds. I could just work in 3/4 speed on those gallops, never off the bridle, and they'd be fully fit going to the races. You know, you don't have to ask them for speed. You don't have to go the last quarter in 24 flat, none of that. It's just a building work. And I think to that extent it's probably kinder on horses, there's no doubt. And then of course we get to the ugly question of medication. And I think there's no doubt, in the old days, back when I trained in the late 70s and 80s in California, it was Bute or Lasix and that was it. That was fine. But it seems like an awful lot of other things crept in, which you would know more about than I would, from synthetic narcotics to God knows what. And I think once that happened, I think you had a corruption of the breed and a corruption of racing, and I think that's been very unhealthy for American racing. I think there are some fabulous trainers and proper horsemen there, but there's an awful lot of guys that came in were quite amoral in their approach to the equine athlete, is probably a polite way of putting it. And to that extent, I think there's been a weakening of the breed in America. I'm very clear that of the horses that come from America, from the sales, I have a far higher incidence of unsoundness than I do from European horses. And that's trying to buy out of families that have raced, not trying to buy out of unraced mares and stuff, out of horses that have raced and have shown soundness. And I think also a much higher percentage of bleeders. And by bleeders I don't mean gushing from the nose, I mean significant bleed on the scope after fast work. And just doing our own records here on USA breds to European breds a much higher incidence, and that is logical if you consider that since the late 70s a lot of horses have been racing on Lasix, so if there is a weakness there you're masking it, and rather than using the old Darwinian genetics, survival of the fittest, you're actually protecting a weakness and allowing it to be sustained through procreation and a bloodline, which in terms of racing and the equine athlete is not a healthy situation. And I think that's the NTRA conference alluded to that. And I think it's a serious issue in America, whether it is, I hate to go to the Breeders' Cup and see 12 2-year-olds line up in a grade 1 and they're all on Lasix. I just think it's wrong. But when you're there, you better use it because it's an advantage. And I myself, if I race in America with a horse who's, I think, could, under the sort of cauldron, the heat of a Breeders' Cup, possibly bleed, or it ever showed me a little tiny bit, I will rail them on Lasix because I'm not going to go in at an unfair disadvantage. But that is because one's inbred in Rome as Romans do. But I don't think it's morally right. I think it's a serious situation that needs to be looked at. And,